Just wanted to introduce ourselves. This is my wife, Kim Bates, and I'm Justin. We've been married for 12 years. We're working on 13. We had this discussion of whether or not that's considered 13 or 12 a few weeks ago.
It's 12 and a half. And we're talking tonight about communication, and we had, you always try to think ahead of time, well, what are we going to talk about? What are the issues that we're going to bring up? What are some things that we can tell? It just always happens. And so we got a phone call Thursday that his aunt had passed away. And so we proceeded to discuss, should we go, should we not go? He said, I really don't want to go at all, but it's his family, so I made him go, and it was the right decision. But then we discussed, should we drive the 22 hours?
Of course it was the right decision.
Should we drive the 22 hours, or should we spend a lot of money and fly? So we chose to spend a lot of money and fly. So I started looking on the internet for prices, and in the meantime, Justin had been praying, God, just if we can get tickets for under so much, then that we can go on that. So I call him, and I got it.
I was asking for a sign.
Yeah, I got the tickets. So he said, book them. Well, I looked at the dates, and it was much cheaper to fly home on a Wednesday, which was Halloween Day. So I struggled with that, and I asked my children, we're going to be not home on time for Halloween. Well, of course, they well up, and their little chins are quivering, and tears are running down. And I've mentored other moms about how to put their God marriage children, in that order. I failed. I did a little no-no, and I thought, I can't do this to my kids. It's 10 o'clock, Justin's going to be home at noon. I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait and book the tickets so he can see them crying about Halloween. Well, we get home, we discuss it, and what happens? I look at the tickets, and we had to spend an extra $400 because the prices went up at noon. So we had really interesting communication time after that.
Our kids learned things.
My mother learned things. She was there helping. So it was just an interesting thing. And it's so funny how when you're supposed to speak on a subject, then that's probably the subject that you're going to get tried on. And it was really interesting. So Justin communicated very well that he was not a happy camper about my little mistake. Enough, I don't know, do you want to expand on that?
No, not so much. Not really.
Enough that my mom goes, I've never seen him that upset in the years you've been married. But what's cool about this story is, she was a little shocked about it. My kids hadn't heard us, discuss loudly things for a while. But what was cool is, in my heart, I knew that, it's okay. We just both need to take a breather, and we'll come back together, and we're going to communicate well with that. So it worked out, and he came back in and said, you know what, we need to go, and we did, and it was definitely well worth it. So
that communication, that stretch there, Kim, this isn't anything that we have written down or anything, but we've done love and respect, and communication to me really starts with this honest feeling between the two of you. It's easy to say and probably much harder to do, but you have to be able to trust that person means the best to you, for you. That Kim never wants to hurt me, and she doesn't want to hurt me. Anyway, but once you have that honest feeling between you, it lets you be so much more open. I mean, you don't feel like she's going to attack you. I've heard people talk about their disagreements as married couples fighting, and to me, fighting is when you're attacking. You're trying to harm or do damage to each other. And in marriage, you want to be building each other all the time. You don't want to be attacking each other, and so you learn to disagree as opposed to fight. And it sounds silly. Maybe try to change the words, but you just have to have that honest, open communication right off the bat. And we were in a heated moment. There's no question about it. But because I knew that she loved me and she meant the best for me and vice versa, we just talked about it, and it really wasn't...
It's just something funny to talk about now.
It wasn't a big deal. Anyway, obviously the subject this week...
is communication. That's what we're going to talk about tonight.
To be intimate, to be close with your partner, with your spouse, you have to have this effective communication. The Bible says that it is not good for man to be alone. And so God created Eve. And when Adam and Eve were together, then creation was complete. Just because we're physically close to each other, obviously we can be far apart if we don't have any communication. You can be in a crowded room. We've all probably felt this at one time or another, and really literally feel completely alone. It's only when somebody else takes the time to understand you that you feel emotionally close. And in a marriage, these two people, you could live in the same room, sleep in the same bed, and unless you have this key, this communication between the two of you, you could be complete and total strangers.
We have a couple that was really close to us that got divorced a couple of years ago. And their story is just like Justin described. We have recently talked to them and asked them, well, what went wrong? And really, both of them were on the same page, and they gave us the same story. We went to work, we came home, and the first year of marriage is tough anyway. There's a lot of things you learn about each other, and the little issues would come up. Instead of talking about them and getting them out on the table, they would turn on the TV. Like so many of us do, or he would go to the computer or play his video games, she would read a book or call a friend. So this wedge began, and there was never really a good start on communication. They never got that part. So they would go to bed at the end of the day, and they had no effective communication, and in the end, they divorced because of it. So. There are three components to effective communication that we're going to talk about. The message is important, the person sending the message, the speaker, and the listener, the one that's receiving the message.
You can kind of look at it like a radio. You've got the program, the message, it's being sent out. You've got the transmitter that's sending it out, and then the receiver that's picking it up. And when they're not tuned properly, that transmitter and that receiver, it's nothing but static. And in a marriage, how many times do we all hear that static? And we need to find ways, and we're going to hopefully find some of those with you, to clear that up, to tune that in completely.
A couple, James and Anna, came as close to divorce as it is possible to get without actually going through with it. Today they're back together with 2 daughters and a transformed marriage. When asked to reflect on what went wrong, they both agreed it was a failure to communicate. Anna wrote this: "Our marriage collapsed because we failed to share our real feelings with one another. I began to confide in my sisters and close friends rather than my husband." And I just want to interject there that is something that I feel like a lot of us women tend to do. And I just feel like it's really important to check yourself on that. It's okay to have close friends. It's okay to talk to your mother and sister about things. But at the end of the day, if you're telling them things that you should be telling your husband, then that's where things start. So this began subtly at first to drive a wedge between us. When we were back together, I resolved not to have a thought life which was secret from James. In the past, I used to dwell on the negative aspects of our relationship, but rarely voiced my feelings. I was effectively setting up a case against him without allowing him to defend himself. We have become much better at recognizing when one of us is brooding over something, and we persistently ask questions to get things out in the open. I tend to have a more dramatic mood swing than James, and if I'm rather low, I find conversation difficult because I tend to shut down emotionally. We have to work much harder during these times to keep real communication going. And then her husband wrote this: "If I had to identify one reason for our separation, it would be ineffective communication. I remember so well the ease with which it is possible to settle downwards into a norm in which the air is filled with words, but nothing is ever really said. All current wisdom on this subject stresses the importance of quality time being carved out of hectic schedules. But this, in my experience, only marks out the space. Effective communication must mean revealing all parts of our lives. In my case, the parts which I'm well practiced at keeping hidden. For me, at least, it requires more than time. It requires courage."
So what are the reasons that people are reluctant to talk about those feelings? Your manuals on page 21, there's this graphic. And for some people, it could be completely because of their background, maybe. Maybe it's just in their personality that they have thoughts that I don't want to disturb the peace by saying how I really feel. Or maybe it's too complicated, or I might be misunderstood. We're trying to give you a place here and a place and the ability to take this home to overcome these barriers that get in the way, these things that make you hold back and not share yourself with your spouse.
You know, earlier on in our marriage, and we honestly still struggle with this a little, I am one of those people, and it is really hard for me sometimes to express my feelings and to open up. I tend to feel kind of embarrassed. I'm scared that people won't want to hear what I'm saying. So when we were first married, I think that was probably one of the biggest things we had to work through and had to learn about communication is he would actually want to talk, and I would be the one, you know, he'd ask me, well, how was your day? Or what did you do? And my answer would be, fine, not much. And so it was really hard for me to open up, and it's still a struggle. We've worked on it a lot, but...
And it's hard to learn how to get you to open up.
Yeah.
How to get you going.
So I still struggle on that one.
But in my mind, in communication, the most important part is listening, not in the actual speaking. You take for granted that you can close your eyes and that you can close your mouth, but you never really stop and realize how much we close our ears. And how selective we become to the things around us and the people around us to whether or not we're willing to listen. And if you don't stop and take time to listen to your spouse, it is so obvious that they're going to shut down. The more you don't listen to them, then they're not going to listen to you, and it becomes this crazy cycle from love and respect. And it's just hard to overcome once it gets started. But the Bible emphasizes also the importance of listening. In the book of James, it says, everyone should be quick to listen, and slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And kind of a modern translation of a proverb also says, answering before listening is both stupid and rude. That's Proverbs 18:13. While trying to put together information on this, Kim found a book, Gary Thomas, and it's Devotions for a Sacred Marriage, and we thought it had an interesting thought about listening also. It says that marriage is a call to listen. Instead of listening, our impatient souls immediately want to provide commentary. Our natural and arrogant selves are eager to speak and eager to be heard and to be understood. But we can't wait to express our own opinions, to state our outrages, or make clear our intentions. Yet the Bible warns, when words are many, sin is not absent. Proverbs 10:19. You know what this tells me in a practical sense? That the pause button on my tongue's remote control should get much more use than the play button.
True.
And this leads us to our first exercise this evening.
Page 22.
Page 22 in the manuals.
There's a few questions. That's not it. There's a few questions to just turn, and we're just going to give you about 5 minutes. And you don't have to do it. Just kind of do a discussion. Just kind of an open discussion about the questions in front of you. Mm-hmm. So when I answered those questions, and that first one in particular, when I'm listened to, I feel loved, supported. Some of you probably answered different things like valued, special, things like that. Confident, that's a big one probably. When we're not listened to, we're probably feeling frustrated, taken for granted, unloved, rejected, embarrassed, unimportant. So there's two sides to that. So what's really cool is we have it within ourselves to make each other feel supported, loved, special. All I have to do is listen to Justin, and he's going to feel that. But on the opposite side, what's just really sad and scary to me is just by not listening, we make our spouses feel rejected, unloved, hurt, where they lose their confidence. So that's a pretty big power there within us to do one thing or the other to our husband or wife. So if we keep that in mind, just little things like listening is going to make a huge difference.
Little?
So I want you to imagine this scene. It's the end of the day. We've come home from work or whatever we've been doing. We're reading the paper or chopping things for dinner. Maybe we're just kind of flipping through the TV. There's that occasional grunt or nod that, yes, we're listening, to acknowledge that we're listening to the other one.
Yeah, that sounds great for dinner, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So then what happens is the telephone rings and we pick it up, and man, it's that buddy we've been wanting to talk to for a long time, or it's that sister we've been excited to talk to, and man, does our tone change.
Ring, ring. Hello, how are you? Everything's great. Oh, this is what happened today. And I'm sitting there going, well, I asked her how she was, and she said she was fine, and went back to work. And
yeah, and you're talking on the phone. You may even leave the room just to kind of excuse yourself because you have so many important things to tell this person. Or you tell your husband or wife, be quiet, I'm on the phone. So he laughs at that because he used to tease me about that a lot. I'd just be like, I've had a long day, kids, I don't want to talk. And, somebody would call, and it literally was that. And until he pointed that out to me, I had no clue I was doing it. But then I'd pay attention, and it really was such a sad change. And then I'd be on the phone, just so friendly, and, the pleasant expression on your face. So that's why he's teasing me.
We were going to ask the front row people, if they fit into this, but
they didn't show
up.
So what happens then is that sort of situation becomes really easy, and because we're just really comfortable with our person. But there's really no one more important than our husband and wife. Okay, and then we can just send that signal so very fast. So we're going to look at two particular hindrances. I don't think that's there. Two particular hindrances that kind of keep us from being good listeners. And the first one is filters. So listening through filters. When someone is speaking, there's always something else going on in our mind a lot of times, and they're associated with strong feelings. Yeah, the earmuffs. They're strong feelings, memories, prejudices, attitudes. Those are the kind of things that affect how we listen to somebody. They act like filters over the ears. We all have them. A lot of times we're not really aware of them, that we actually show that. They can cause separate conversation going on in our head while we're sitting there nodding and acting like we're listening to that person. So the first one we're going to talk about is memories. When someone speaks, a lot of times it'll trigger some sort of memory. It might be a past memory, or it could be something that happened earlier that day. This actually, I feel like I'm confessing a lot of my faults tonight, by the way. This happened to me today. We had our funeral in Oregon, and during a week span, my side of the family, we had some close friends, close cousins. They were sisters, and one